week. And so far it seems like the internet's been in a good mood today. And we have a smaller group on site tonight. There are a few people here listening. So for those of you who were here on this Zoom last week, we're kind of, this discussion is kind of based on that meditation, which we did, the meditation that actually encourages and supports the marriage between your own masculine and your own feminine within. So this week we're going to do a little discussion about that. So people who have questions about that are welcome to ask them, including you guys. Great. There's Lisa. And so for those who weren't here last week, I'll just kind of run over the format that we had so feel a little more oriented. Is there anyone who wasn't here last week? I think there are a few people. Yeah, great. So marriage is a major, I would say, pivotal phenomenon in the tantric tradition. It's very central to the whole study of Tantra and the whole practice of Tantra in its original form. And that's, for those of you who haven't seen it, that is the message of the Haddon Model, which is, of course, the statue that depicts graphically Shiva with being half male on the right and half female on the left. An example of which you can see when you visit Dancing Shiva, because it was gifted to us by Arabella. It's a beautiful brass statue. So that work of art is sort of depicts what our subject is for tonight. And the reason that it's so central to Tantra and actually to yoga as well is that the opening of the sixth chakra is really hinging on the development of the relationship between the right and the left. And that is graphically depicted in the posters. I don't think we have one in here, but the posters that you see in most yoga salas that shows the chakras and then the nadis. The nadis making a sort of intertwining pathway up the spine. But when the nadis, the right nadi through the right nostril, left nadi through the left nostril, when they reach this point, they don't go any further. They stop. There's a single line, which is a way of indicating that in order to move beyond this point, this marriage has to be consummated. And that's something that happens within us. The other indication of that is the fact that in yoga, you will learn that you open sushumna, meaning the central channel, by equalizing nostrils. In other words, the right and the left have to be balanced and in harmony in order for this single channel to open to bring consciousness up to the crown chakra. So these are little silent but visual indications that the intermarriage is really a fulcrum for all of yoga and tantra. And yet, interestingly enough, in some schools of neo-tantra, or whatever you want to call it, that have come to the US and that that are predominant on the West Coast primarily, that they don't talk much about the intermarriage. So in my upbringing in Tantra, that would have been unthinkable because it's very central. My teacher saying to us one time when we were all gathered, someone said something about, well, men do this, well, do women, da 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 da. And he just said, when will you stop thinking of yourselves as men and women? And everybody looked at him baffled, like, what does he mean? We are men and women. Well, you are until you get here. And then you have to give up that idea if you're going to go on up further. So, yeah. So we do the meditation that we did last week. That's a way of encouraging and supporting the dialogue between him and her. Of course, you have to learn to get to this chakra, and you have to go back from that chakra to the center of the skull. And then you look down to find him, and then you look down to find her. And then you ask each of them to share with you what's going on with them. Whatever their concerns or agonies or delights or happiness or hopes and fears, all that. And you listen to each of them.
Raviji, we've lost you. Hang on for a few minutes, everyone. We're hopeful that they'll come back.
He seems so clear. That's too bad.
Where is he?
He's down in Zipolite, or San Agustinilla, which is on the Gulf of Mexico. And I don't know exactly who asked me where he was, but we have friends who live down there at Rancho Largo, people that I studied with, as well as friends of theirs who have become part of our big family. So I'm not exactly sure where he was going with his talk about the masculine and feminine, but I'm willing, if you like, if you have thoughts or questions, I'm willing to field them to the extent of my own personal insights. So we are, of course, hopeful that he'll realize that he's not with us, but sometimes he gets unstuck, if you will, and doesn't actually know that he's not still talking to us. So that's what happened last week, for those of you who were here last week. So if you have thoughts or questions or anything, please, speak right up.
When Rudy was talking about needing to have a closer marriage between our sense of masculine and feminine to move beyond the sixth chakra, I'm wondering, in a moment-to-moment daily basis, who does one feel one's self to be at such a juncture or transformational point, practically?
Could you ask that again in an entirely different way? Because I think I understand what you're asking, but I don't want to go on a presumption. And also Lise may have some comments as well, but if you could just ask it in a very different way.
Okay.
Give my brain something else to think about.
Okay, as a 71-year-old man, I have a certain sense of self, even though I do have a spiritual practice. But if I'm getting to a point of maturity where I can actually wed the sense of masculine and feminine aspects of myself, such that I could move beyond sixth chakra, what would my sense of persona be? Who would I feel would I be truly androgynous, or what is it like practically?
Well, I think you're confusing masculine, feminine with gender.
Okay.
And this is my take on it. And Lise may have a further layer to add. The place of where our masculine, that is to say, our consciousness, and our feminine, which is to say, the manifestation, at the place where those two meet, there is no longer a witness per se. So there's no being who says, who am I now? There's no longer that ego-based conceptualization of ourselves. Now, for most of us, we have glimpses of this state in meditation. And the discernible observation is when both nostrils are open. That's kind of like the physiology. But in the metaphysical, there is no focus of space, time, or causality. We have become unstuck in time, unstuck in space, in that non-space, non-time of utter bliss. So the real trick is, how do I go from that place, or that non-place, that state where consciousness and all of manifestation are one in that inner marriage? How do I now carry that forward into my daily life and my interactions with individuals on Zoom, and the fact that the neighbor keyed my car, and and the dog barks, and how do we maintain that? And that is, of course, our invitation and our challenge. And it's for those moments when we're able to do that in what we might call the integral consciousness. It's those moments that we can do that sustain us in the in-between.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Lise, did you have comments you wanted to make? You have to unmute.
Thank you. I'm in the teacher training with Swamiji, the Tantra teacher training. So I did my module on the inner marriage. So I am an eternal student, but this has been something that I've been looking at or studying for a long time, since Kali Rising came out, one of Swami Ravi's books on the inner marriage. And one thing I would just say is, I believe last week was the meditation of bringing consciousness down to the root chakra, and from the root chakra going up. Was that the meditation along the spine? I think it was, or am I thinking?
No, we were doing the he-she meditation.
He-she, okay. But if any of you participated in also the root chakra, you know, the feminine Shakti is in our root chakra, and the consciousness is coming down. Shiva comes down with the light of consciousness, and Shakti comes up. So constantly, whether it's your persona, your gender, as Arabella points out, we're constantly having a dialogue between our inner masculine and feminine. And I think when you begin to reflect on that, then I think it's ever present, not just above, as you said, you know, when you get above this sixth chakra, what does it look like? I mean, Arabella did a great job of talking about the non-manifest up at the crown chakra. But I think being conscious of it, of that inner marriage, that inner dialogue all the way through, that constant dialogue is important as well. And that may be redundant to what your experience is, but.
Thank you. Anyone else? And thank you for that incredible question, Lee. That was really helpful. Anyone else?
And just on cue.
Oh, it looks like they might be coming back. Yay.
We're going to keep the camera on. Oh, okay. I'm going to be in. Thank you, Arabella, for hanging in there.
Yeah, we were having a lovely conversation. Lee asked about when one is in the inner marriage, how does one perceive oneself? So we've had a discussion about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you sort of become gender fluid, quote unquote. What else did people say? What were people's ideas about what happens when you are acting from the inner marriage? Does anybody want to repeat what you said so I can hear?
Well, I spoke, this is Arabella, by the way. I spoke of the confusion that we sometimes make when we self-identify as either masculine or feminine, and confusing that with gender. And so I talked a little bit about what is masculine and what is feminine, not much, just a little. And then about the non-space, non-time, beyond causality, and the integral consciousness. And then
Right.
Lee's talked a little bit about the merging of Shiva and Shakti.
Mm, good. So, any other comments or questions? Any continuation of the discussion? Jamie, I just know you have something to say about this.
Well, you know, I don't know. I was just I don't remember what I was just thinking about because you just called me out. Well, I was thinking about the shape of the, you know, the symbol at Anahata of the downward triangle and the upward triangle. And I was thinking of the Sri Vidya, you know,
right.
3D sculpture or whatever form. And like these energies down and energies up. And that's based on what Lisa had talked about, and the meeting at the heart being above the diaphragm line, and just this kind of placement of ajna, and the sort of lower ajna and the upper ajna with the is it the Atara Linga there, that Shakti breaks through the diamond hard cap there and arises through, you know, the more subtle nadis. So that's what I was kind of thinking about. And I was like, what question could I ask you about that? But I didn't get that far.
Great, great. No, those are wonderful things to share. Thank you. Yeah, it's actually so much all through Tantra, you know, and yoga. You see, like you're saying, the symbol for the heart chakra is descending and the ascending, and that's Shakti and Shiva, Shiva descending and Shakti rising. And that's another aspect of the intermarriage, the above and the below, and the right and the left. And so everywhere you look, there it is. In nature, everywhere you look, there it is. It's the marriage between the two. And, you know, there's always a philosophical debate in spirituality about, you know, duality and non-duality. And my understanding is pretty simplistic, because I just say, and when you talk about the intermarriage, non-duality is post-marital. And
Oh no.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if we should try, like we did that one time, if we all turn off our videos.
Lisa, thank you, but that's not the problem. The problem isn't the bandwidth of the server. I'm the server. The problem is he has very sporadic internet access. So Jamie mentioned the Sri Vidya, also known as Sri Chakra, also known as Shodashi Yantra. And I'm sure you've seen it. It's a series of inverted and upright triangles. And this yantra, it's a geometric form. Sometimes you call them, what do you call them here? Not yantras, you call them mandalas.
Mandala.
Mandalas. Thank you, Lars. Yeah, so I'm sure you've seen this particular one. It's used everywhere. And the Metropolitan, the Metropolitan Opera Group in New York, when they do the Magic Flute, they use designs from way back, like the sets and everything are way back from the 50s. And they have this huge projection of the Sri Vidya that they put up during the Magic Flute, which is a hot mess opera anyway. But it's just so intriguing that the symbology of the masculine and feminine are just so prevalent throughout.
Right.
And specifically in Tantra, the intermarriage is the thing that distinguishes this particular school of Tantra from all the other schools of Tantra. And here he's back again.
Yeah. And we're talking about integral consciousness. Of course, you can't have it divided into masculine and feminine. It's all there. So we were talking, it went off here in the group that's here, the folks that are here in the yoga sala, about the sort of planetary crisis of coming to grips with the intermarriage to open the sixth chakra, and how that manifests in many ways, including all of the, what do you call it, kerfuffle about, gender fluidity and gender this and gender that, and people changing their gender, and people being, one gender and then another, and then everybody's trying in different ways to come to grips with the melding of these things that we've had so rigidly separated for so long. And that's a developmental step, I think, in terms of planetary consciousness. So it seems kind of like a digression from the mainstream, but actually I think it is the mainstream at this point. And so it's something that deserves our attention and our and in your practice to become aware of the dichotomy, and to begin to imagine and to experiment with what is it like to be in both. And Swami Ravi used to say that when you open Sushumna, you're not suited for doing things in the world, because the world's not set up like that. It's set up for this in this binary way. So, we haven't invented how to do this yet, how to be in both, but it's waiting for us to do.
So the nadis cross at each chakra.
Yeah.
So we have something to consider at each chakra.
Yeah.
For the masculine and the feminine.
Yeah. One way to conceptualize that, excuse me, I'm having trouble. Is that at each chakra, as the nadis ascend, they encounter a little conflict. And the masculine and feminine are at odds in some particular way at each chakra. And that's something that you or I have to work out in our inner dynamic between the masculine and feminine in order to be able to move the energy up to the next chakra. So that's the way they're organized. So in the second chakra, it's about sexuality. In the third chakra, it's about who's on top, who's in charge, who's in control. And so it's a lot about domination and submission. And these are like themes that are normally associated with those chakras, but But in this case, we're looking at how those themes color the relationship between him and her inside of us. And then at the heart chakra, of course, it's about love and the arms being connected with the heart chakra. It's about, embracing, but it's also about pushing away, and it's like, oh, I love you, get out of here, kind of those issues that we experience in relationships. And then the throat chakra, which must be very active, my conflict there tonight because I'm having trouble talking. It's about being able to say your truth, speak the truth, speak your truth, your creativity, your offering to the universe, to the planet, or not. And that's why back when I was practicing holistic medicine in New York, I saw so many women in their 40s who were having thyroid problems because the throat chakra was, because women were, getting more independent, women were strong, women wanted to express themselves, but everywhere they went, men were trying to squelch them, like, no, so there was this trauma in the throat center. And uniformly, when that got addressed and it opened, those dynamics shifted dramatically. And then in this chakra, of course, it's, can we bridge the gap between this world and the world of integral consciousness, where, or enlightenment, or whatever you want to call it, where we are aware of everything, everywhere, all the time. And it's like, no. But that's what's waiting for us. And Gebser is, who writes about these structures of consciousness, is so explicit about, if you back off from opening this chakra, from opening that, moving into that consciousness, then something's going to happen, not good, that your world will undergo atomizing dissolution. That's the phrase he uses. Because everything now we need to be conscious of everything. If we're not going to be conscious of it, it's going to, then our world, our consciousness is going to diffuse so that we come into that space without our identity. That's kind of complicated to understand, but so we don't want to shirk the challenge of moving into the integral consciousness, because that's our destiny and that's what the world needs for us to do. Because we've gone too deep into the duality, too much into the conflict, too much into the fear, and too much into the, where we're at odds with everything around us, where they're enemies, the germs are trying to kill us, and the viruses and all that nonsense. So we have to move on to, I am all of that. And that's the great message of the masters of the Far East. Tattva Masi, I am that, I'm all that, I'm all of it. And that's like, what? That's a lot for us to grok, but there it is. It's waiting to be integrated into us, and us to be integrated into the oneness. And that's has been the goal of all the great spiritual traditions, to become one with God. It's not a new thing. It's not something that just got invented, but we're bumping up against it now in a way that is kind of urgent, you might say, or irresistible, or at the same time it's frightening. And the intermarriage is kind of the gateway. If we can't get past the intermarriage, we're not going to be able to do that. So here we are still having, divorces and conflict and, sexual identities, and I'm male now, no, I'm female, what am I? I'm both. And we have to quit thinking of ourselves as men and women and start being the Ardharnarishvara, the combination, which is what we truly are. So how do we function these days? Well, pre-intermarriage is we function, we have our consciousness in one side of the brain for 2 or 3 hours, and then we switch to the other side of the brain. And we forget what it was like before. So if you watch your nose, you're going to be breathing through one side for 2 or 3 hours, 4 hours, and then you switch to the other side. Now, technically that's called schizophrenia, where I'm this person and I'm this person, forgotten about that. No, now I'm this person, I forgot about that. That's a split personality, if there were one. And a very awkward way to inhabit planet nowadays. So we got to give that up. We got to learn to open the central channel and be aware of both. Not necessarily always, but we have to access that consciousness. And meditation is the tool for that. If you sit and meditate, it begins to happen. If you kind of let go your everyday waking consciousness and you let go your dream world, then you begin to drift into this other space where everything's there and there's no differentiation. And you can get back from that, don't worry. So that's my little rant. I don't know what other questions people might have.
Swami Ravi, this is Jody.
Hi, Jody.
I've been reflecting a lot on the 4-partite nature of the yin and yang feminine and the yin and yang masculine. I'm curious if you can maybe speak to how that plays into the intermarriage and how important it is to bring that into all of these inquiries that you've been speaking about.
Well, the right nostril is the masculine, right? But you can exhale through the right nostril or you can inhale through the right nostril. So the masculine has an active aspect and a passive aspect. So these are the 2 gears of the masculine, 2 gears of the left hemisphere, because they cross. And similarly, the left nostril is your feminine, so to speak, Shakti, but it has a receptive and it has an active space. So we have all of it right here in the breath. Actually everything is in the breath. It gets more complicated, but these are the simple, obvious aspects of the breath. So that is the starting point. And also we have the anatomy to remind us that the masculine has 2 aspects. It has what is called a testicular aspect, which is containment and protecting and containing. And it has a phallic aspect, which is penetrating. In Tantra, we like to clarify and say that, that penetrating aspect of the masculine is not meant to be invasive. It's meant to penetrate through consciousness. In other words, what's penetrating is consciousness. And that's actually the nature of Shiva. Shiva is the descending light of consciousness that penetrates our world and illuminates what's going on. So that's the 2 aspects of the masculine. The feminine has 2 aspects anatomically, physiologically, functionally, in that the uterus, it does you know, it doesn't always do the same thing. For a while, it nurtures, it holds and nurtures for 9 months. And then suddenly, all of a sudden, it quits doing that. And it expels what's in the uterus. So it's pushing out into manifestation. So that aspect of us that's creative is really the yang feminine. That means that's the aspect of us that brings things out into the world to manifest. That's our creativity. And, you know, it's kind of an old platitude that, well, men aren't that creative, women are more creative than men. Well, yeah, in that if you only have access to your masculine and you deny your feminine, you're actually cutting yourself off from a lot of your creativity. Because it is the nature of Shakti. She is the creative force. She is power. Power in Tantra does not belong to the masculine. Shiva is not powerful. He's consciousness. Shakti is powerful. She manifests and creates the whole universe. So, is this a clue? Jody, does that help a little bit? She's muted. Oh, no.
Yes, that's very helpful. And I have another curiosity based on what you said,
Good.
if you feel like speaking about it.
Sure.
This idea of how Shakti is the manifest and Shiva is the light of consciousness. We have the capacity to access the non-manifest. And I'm just curious if you can speak for a moment about the dance that happens there between the manifest and the unmanifest, like how the light of consciousness is feeding and nourishing and affecting the manifest.
Yeah, that's, thank you for that question. Well, we say that Shiva, it's Shiva's illumination that brings the awareness of the chakras so that Shakti can ascend and activate different chakras. But it's also true that Shiva, the manifestation comes from her, but it's his light that allows us to perceive it. So really, this is something for people who are functioning mostly from their masculine ought to understand that your role, the role of your masculine in relation to the feminine is to bring light of consciousness down. It's also, incidentally, to contain so that her manifestation isn't just spilling out on the floor like water, but that the river over, running out over the land, but rather they're banks that give her the flow of Shakti, strength, allow it to build strength. It's her strength, but it's the banks of the river, if Shakti is the river, the banks of the river that let that strength build to a point where manifestation can occur. And then the role of the masculine is to just stand there and go, wow, that's an important piece. The masculine, our masculine is supposed to facilitate and support her creation, and then to admire it and adore it. So these are essential parts of relationship, because a lot of our relationship is somebody's acting from the feminine, somebody's acting from the masculine. It's not always conformed to your anatomical sex, but we play those roles because those are the two sides of our personality. Does that help? Okay, great. What else is lingering in people's minds?
This is George.
Yes, sure.
And when you talk about our world, I'm wondering if you really mean our culture, or is it something about the world and nature, our world and nature in general, writ large?
Yeah, thank you. I guess I'm not being very explicit about that. Sometimes I mean the world at large, and sometimes I mean our culture. So I should specify. That would make things less confusing. Certainly there are things about our world means Western culture that is different from this where Tantra originated in India. And that's an ongoing study to understand the difference between those two. And in this school of Tantra, we spend a lot of time trying to comprehend the original teachings. And then we spend at least that much time, again, trying to figure out how to bring that into the Western culture so people can understand it. And those are both big orders.
Yeah.
The tradition of Tantra is so diverse and so extensive and so long-standing that it takes a long, long time to begin to wrap your mind around it at all. And then you're still usually limited by cultural conditioning to some extent. And but because you're limited by cultural constraints, if you can get some of the essence of it, then you're a good person to bring it to people who are still further from it. So we're setting up a a chain here that allows the East and West to kind of begin to come together some.
So you're saying you think there are a couple of levels of gated perception that one, the bigger one being cultural, but also just there's a deeper one that is true for the world in general.
I think there's many of those levels.
Okay.
Then you dig deeper and you go, oh, and then you dig deeper and you go, oh, that happens to me all the time as I practice and study and remember what I was taught. And I'll be doing something, I'll go, oh, now I understand. Well, yeah, I understand at today's level, but 3 or 4 days later, I'm going, oh, now I understand. So, but that's the joy of it, that you don't exhaust it. It keeps going.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Swamiji, this is Lisa.
Yeah.
And you may not want to go down this windy road, but in following up with George's comment about the culture, our world, the tradition, sort of there's the inner marriage and of course the outer marriage. And, every time I hear you describe or read, about or can focus on the beautiful way that Shiva supports and helps illuminate Shakti, I just get all excited and I can feel the energy moving. And then I think about the outer world outside and our current conditions. And I think about this practice and the necessity for this practice, given the lack of consciousness in the quote unquote manifest masculine right now. And I don't know if you want to speak to that at all as far as the intermarriage and the
Yeah. Well, yes, it's definitely, it's a big issue and a big problem. And almost everybody knows that by now. Maybe some people are holding out and no, there's nothing wrong, I'm fine. But yeah, it's because what we have been taught means what we've been taught that it means to be a man turns out to be kind of a bad deal, for everybody. It involves rigidity, authoritarianism, a cutting off from our feminine. So we don't have any access to much pleasure. We don't have access to creativity. I mean, who wants that? That's not doing anyone anything. But that's what's been available in terms of role models and sense of the role of the masculine. And that is changing very rapidly. And the younger generation is, generally not buying it. They're just like, I don't want that. I'm not even going there. And so it's changing, and it changes. For it to change, the change is initiated from within each of us. So it's what you do about your masculine and the awareness you bring to it and the way you use it in the world that begins to change the world. And it's what I do inside of me with my masculine, that as I manifest that and bring it into application in the world, then that's a tiny little step, but we need billions of tiny little steps to do this, because it's a humongous change. It's not a small thing. It's absolutely earth-shaking, so to speak. Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, thank you all. Thank you.
That's why we're Zooming from Mexico.
Yeah, right. Thank you all for being here tonight and being patient with our deficient internet. And we hope that where we're moving to tomorrow, nearby, is going to have better internet, but that may not be true. But we're going to keep trying, and actually somehow Carol made it work, and I don't know how. So we prevailed, and hooray, we got to do this session tonight. So next week is another question. All right, have a good week, and if you want to, Carol's going to say a few words.
Yes, as always, this session has been recorded by Arabella. Thank you, Arabella, and for hosting tonight. If you want to find this session or last week's session, the intermarriage meditation, and perhaps examine your intermarriage, the dialogue of inside you, you can find the recordings on Dancing Shiva YouTube, on the Dancing Shiva YouTube channel. And it's also in Kali Rising. And there's also a verbal or a audio meditation on the Dancing Shiva YouTube channel as well. It's just the intermarriage.
Guiding you through.
Yes.
Through the meditation. And most of the previous sessions we've done are also available.
Correct.
On the Dancing Shiva YouTube channel. So anytime you get curious or want to see what was happening 6 months ago, you can do that.
Yeah. So yes, we're moving to a new location. Hopefully we'll have a different experience with our Zoom session. And we will be here again next Sunday night, be on together again next Sunday night. And next Sunday will be a meditation with a new topic to consider. So join us if you can. It's wonderful to see you. And also you might, Arabella has her hand up.
I just wanted to mention that on my Tantra group's next Tuesday night class, which is February 2nd, we will be spending 2 hours exploring this subject. So if you're interested in Zooming with us, you could shoot me an email or something.
You, Arabella, would you put your email in the chat?
I will. Thank you. That's a good idea.
Yeah. Arabella has many offerings, so it's a good
Arbel, do you mean in
resource.
2 days or in a week? Like
In
10
2 days. February 2nd.
Beautiful. So you might unmute yourself and we'll say thank you, good night,
Yes.
buenas noches.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you so much.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you.
Good night,
Buenas
Dr.
noches.
Thank you, Jamie, Arabella, and everybody who spoke
Oh.
up.
So good to see you all. especially-
Gracias. Buenas noches.
Gracias.
Thank
you. Good night.
Hasta pronto.
The Horseman, George, everybody.
Good night.
See you later.